let me share my screen. One second. Hold on, I want to, there we go. I'll share my screen. All right. So, okay, so we kind of start off with our RDS data, right? And then we cleaned it up. And then we added in, or some of you have added in, right, this HubSpot data. And the next step was to like really clean that up. So, 1 second. At this point, we look at the code, we added in these seed files here, and then we ran dbt seed, and that will create, if you just like psql-g northwinds, basically in the schema specified in your profile. So for me, it's in dev. If you do, and it's a table, not a view. So if you do /dt dev.star, you should see, right, like these two tables: Northwinds HubSpot, Northwinds Mixpanel created. By the way, the command I gave in Slack was it's not there, but it was basically something like curl down data from like the URL from that GitHub URL, and it was the raw data, and then I did arrow. So right, this arrow into something like Northwinds, whatever it is, .csv, or like HubSpot customers, whatever it is, HubSpot .csv. This is a redirect, right? Like normally when you do a curl, it's going to just like display the content on the screen. But this arrow says instead of displaying on the screen, write it to this file, HubSpot.csv. So that's what that line in Slack was doing. All right. So we should have, then you move the data into here, you do dbt seed, it creates those tables. Then the next step is really like clean up this data, right? So you can kind of see I like select from this source, HubSpot, Northwinds HubSpot, and like clean up the company ID similarly to what we did. We have to do another group by, I guess, because we might have more than one company, same kind of issue. If the grain of the data is originally contacts, right? The company might be listed more than once. And then same thing here, just like did similar kind of cleaning up. Get rid of the stuff for the phone number, and then format it the way that we want for the phone number, join in the company ID. All right, so these are all kind of the same type of transformations that we saw before. And then my sources file, right, I'm just giving a new namespace of HubSpot, and then connected to the database, the right schema, and the right table name, and now I can reference that from the source over here. So you can see, right, we have kind of the same kind of data in HubSpot, this companies, right? We have HubSpot companies, HubSpot contacts, RDS companies, RDS customers, but they're basically the same thing, over here. And so the next step, now that we are here, we have these multiple sources, one-for-one staging for each one of the sources. Now it's to combine, like our contacts, for example. So how do we do that? Well, the technique is always like pretty similar. Essentially, what we do is remember we have this source of company information, okay, that has our RDS companies. This is coming from staging, and we gave it like this company ID, right? That came from staging, and I guess like a first name, last name, or maybe this is the. Sorry, I'm working with this example is a little bit off because it's companies, not contacts, but this is the company name. And then you also have companies for HubSpot, all right? So again, this has like a HubSpot company ID and then the name of the company. So we have one set of data from RDS, right, our OLTP, one set of data from HubSpot. What we want to do is like stack this data on top of one another, right? Like the first step is just combine it, meaning, we see Alfred twice, but he's in two different tables. We're just going to stack them on top so that Alfred will be twice in the same table. So that's what you can see I do here, right? Now we have Alfred once because we're stacking together all of my RDS data, and this is my RDS data right here, and then on top of it, and then below it will come all of our HubSpot data. Okay, so this is why Alfred's here twice, because we're taking this data and then we stack on this data. How do we do that in SQL? You do a union statement. So I'm selecting the columns I want from companies, and then I do union all right, to make sure I then stack on the data from HubSpot. So first take the RDS data, then stack the HubSpot data, and what we'll get is something like this, where you have all of the data from both the tables stacked on one another. One kind of thing to keep in mind is when you do the union all, the number of columns have to be the same, and we want to hold on to, we're going to want to hold on to ultimately like my HubSpot ID and my RDS ID. Like we're going to want to keep these separate. So the way that you do this is you just like say, you know, it's kind of logical, right? Like when I'm pulling in my RDS data, there shouldn't be an RDS company ID. There shouldn't be a HubSpot company ID, right? Like there is no, right? We have it's an RDS company ID. It's not HubSpot. So all we can do is just like basically have none here. And the way that you can accomplish that is what we're doing is we're saying, okay, first I'm pulling in my RDS data. So I want my RDS company ID, and instead of like any value for the HubSpot company ID, just say null. So this will be null when I'm pulling the RDS data, and HubSpot company ID, so HubSpot company ID will be null when I'm pulling in the RDS data, and RDS company ID will be null when I'm pulling in the HubSpot data. And you can see that's what's getting accomplished here, is that with the RDS data, HubSpot company ID is null. With the HubSpot data, RDS company ID is null. Okay? And again, the way that we do that is just to select, this is the RDS data, so give me the RDS company ID, and whenever you get to HubSpot, just put in null. All right? And then when we get here, same thing. When we get to RDS, put in null. And that will result in something like this. Okay? And this is good because we have the same number of columns. We have this, you know, we're not losing any data in terms of the HubSpot company ID or the RDS company ID. But you can see we have these duplicated records of like, here's Alfred and then here's Alfred. So how do we dedupe this, right? All we do is a group by. You know, where you feel confident saying this is the same company or this is the same person, right? You do a group by. Meaning in this case, we can group by name. But if this was like a contact information, we would do like group by first name, comma, last name, right? And what would this do? This would put our data into buckets where the first name and last name is the same. We would get the same bucket. If you're like, well, you're gonna have lots of people with the same first name and last name, even if they're just share the same name but they're different people, then you would add columns to group by. Like I said, like maybe the zip code, right? Or, you know, most confidently would be like the phone number. The issue is you need something where, right, there's overlapping columns between both sources. So the phone number, maybe you don't have that. Maybe that won't capture enough people. If you don't have the phone number from both sources. So maybe it would be something like the zip code or something like that. Okay. This may take some data exploration to figure out what are the best columns to group by. Once you do that, once you do the group by, so the first step is the union all, stack them on top of another. The next step is to do the group by. And notice that what we'll really do, you can see down here, is group by name and then use max, right? What will max do? So say we group by name, so now this person and this person are going to be combined. If I do max of HubSpot company ID, it's going to choose this value because the max of a string and null, right? The maximum value is going to be the present string and remove the null. So that's what's happening here. Okay? And then for this person, let's say this RDS thing, the max of this, Anna, and Anna down here will choose this value. So that's what's happening, here, is we're getting the company ID, right? Like we're holding on to the single value that we actually have. And then for Anna's also over here, right? Here we have hold on to our HubSpot company ID because this is none in one case and this is present in the other case. So we just keep holding on to the present values, and then where they are the same, like where we feel confident that Anna, that this should be the same, right? We just, we don't even have to do it. We're grouping by this, so we can just literally have name. So that's this query. Select max of the HubSpot company ID as the HubSpot company ID, right? That will give me the present value here and get rid of the null. RDS company ID, right? That gives me the present value in RDS, comma, this should be a comma in here, comma name. You can select name because we're grouping by it from the merged data. So that's basically the full query. And you can see that if you look at my integration, that's what's happening here, right? What we're doing is we're first pulling the contacts from HubSpot, and customers comes from RDS, and then what do? We do the union all to stack one on top of the other. And in addition, we need to say, okay, this is my HubSpot data, right? Because it's contacts. Contacts is HubSpot. So we select the contact ID as the HubSpot contact ID and null as RDS, because we're not going to have an RDS contact ID for this. But we want to, when we combine the data, we want to hold on to both each record's HubSpot ID and their RDS ID. Okay, so we do that kind of pattern, and then we do the exact same thing here. Null for HubSpot, right? Because this is RDS information, and then the actual value for RDS, right? The customer ID. Move that into RDS contact ID. Then these all line up: first name, last name, phone. First name, last name, phone. And I think we're pretty good. I wonder why I have this twice here. I'd have to think about that. I think this is a mistake. Maybe. I can't remember. And then at the very end, right, now we apply the maxes, like I said, right? Because we want to hold on to the present values here. Okay? And same thing, I guess we're not grouping by phone, so to hold on to it, we just take the max. But we could potentially. And the reason why probably we're not grouping by phone is in some records we actually capture the phone, and in other records we don't. So maybe like from RDS we're getting some of them, and from HubSpot we're not, and vice versa. So this again allows us to hold on to the present values, like where we have present values, hold on to them, right? Which is basically what we want. So just to show it one more time, basically this pattern of, combining by doing the union all, separating out the IDs, right? And then doing the max means where we have a present value, we will hold on to it, right? Whether it's, whether it's this kind of mismatch here, or you can imagine that like with phone, that sometimes we have present values, right? And then sometimes we're just missing it, And so we want to hold on, when we do max, right, this will allow us to hold on to the present values. Yeah, Conwell?
Yeah, so we use this bit different approach for accomplishing this. Can you please go back to the CSV?
Here?
Yeah. So what we did was we first created CTEs for just getting the name for the company, for example. And then we did union instead of union, which will eventually give us all the distinct names there.
Yeah, but you don't want to do that.
And
yeah, keep going.
And then finally what we did was we did the join with the original HubSpot and the RDS staging tables to get whatever corresponding ID there is. So we eventually eliminated the need of having group by and this max using the max function. So, and it actually achieved the same result for us. So I was wondering, is there a drawback to that approach?
Well, I mean, I guess you just want to be able to be specific as to which data you're combining. I mean, in this case, we're just, or which data you're grouping by. Like you can see when we get to the, no, this is actually contacts. I think I copied in the wrong one. Like here, you can see I'm like grouping by first and last name with contacts, you know. Um, so like this allows me to, I mean, you might be able to do that otherwise. I'm not sure, but I think like just allowing myself to be specific as to where I can combine the data, that's helpful. But I can take a look at that separately. But this is like this is the technique that you'll normally use. Is basically stack it all together, union all. If you do union, right, kind of like what Conwell was saying. If you do union, that will try to merge it. It will not. It will combine the data automatically. What we want to do is have a stage where it's spread out. Where by that I mean where Alfred is listed twice, you know, and then we want to be able to combine Alfred. A good reason for that is basically debugging is one good reason for that. You know, like this separates it into these different steps of first just combine all the data, make sure you're not losing anything, and then in the last CTE combine it. And that way I can kind of show you, like we can then easily look at our data and see where there's an overlap and where there's not, which is really useful. So for example, you know, when you write this thing and then you write, this should really be int contacts, because that's what this is. And then you do dbt run, right? Remember, this is going to create for us in here this int, you know, this should be contacts, but this int contacts. Let's just do dbt run maybe again. Okay, and now here it is. So now here's my int contacts. So we now have this file, right, where it's broken up into these different steps. And what I did after this was I just took this part, right? It creates this view, and that I don't need. But we do have this with contact. This is basically my whole SQL query. So what I did was then, you know, go over to like notes. I just made a folder called notes, and then created, and now we can just paste this here. All right. So basically, I took the compiled code. Sorry about that. I took the compiled code in my run folder, target run, int contacts, and I just copied and pasted it like a little bit separately. You don't even have to do that, but I felt like it. And now I can like see how this thing works. So in other words, let me give you an example. So if you think about what this occurs, this is my import CTEs with contacts as, with customers as. This is my combining step right here. If I want to look at the combining step, all I have to do is, instead of selecting all from final, I can select all from merged contacts. So let's do that. And let's do like limit, you know, 20. And we can also do like order by the, this is the last name. Descending. Okay, and then we can just run this file against the database. So that's what I'm doing here. PSQL-D-F, run this file, and then I can see kind of what occurs with merge contacts. So you can see that this is exactly kind of what we said. We have two of this Jamie Yoris. You can see that like this. First of all, these should line up. Like I actually have an error here, right? Because these should be all like aligned in terms of their formatting. And then you can see that we're stacking these on top of each other. So this is obviously coming from RDS, whereas this is coming from HubSpot, you know, and then I can take a look and see like both which data I should feel confident grouping by, as well. So it seems like first name, last name is pretty good. And that's the combined step. But I like the idea of seeing all the data first, you know, in this combined stage, and always being able to like go back and easily just view that, and then determining what is safe to group by, right? So like here would be first name, last name. You can see that it would be a mistake if I did first name, last name, phone, because these people have the same phone numbers, you know, but I'm not formatting it properly. So just for debugging purposes, that's like what I would recommend doing. And then we can look at this last part just by just changing this to final. Now we won't have multiple last names, limit 20, and just and then rerun this again. And now this is my combined data. So here is a case where Sergio is showing up, both in HubSpot and in RDS Contact. And you can see, right, this is off too, right? I must have been getting his phone number from the poorly formatted one. So we'd want to clean this up in staging. But this is a nice procedure of separating this out just for debugging sake. How can you perform validation tests for data quality on a merged table between HubSpot table and RDS table? You can write, we haven't gotten to SQL tests, but you can write tests in DBT as well and kind of like set up scenarios to confirm, like, okay, when this occurs, this is kind of, this is going to be the result. Just like we saw with SQL tests, like we already saw SQL tests basically through Python, but we will do testing again in DBT. So yeah, we'll get there. All right, but I wanted you all to understand this flow and make sure you kind of get it conceptually, and then just ironing out the details that you'll be able to do. But it's basically, let's just see it one more time. We're gonna, here it is. Have our import CTEs, right? The two files that we want to combine, and there could be more than just two, obviously, right? If we have like lots of different sources. So, what we want to combine, then we'll stack them on top of each other, okay? And not combine, union all means we're not merging them. We're just stacking them on top of each other. We'll have to, separate out certain columns, right? So we want to, this one was going to be null when we're pulling RDS data. This guy is going to be null when we're pulling in HubSpot data. And then we will finally combine them by specifying which columns to group by, and then choosing the max, which will get rid of my null value, where it will prefer the present values over the null values. That's the general flow of this. Okay. And this is like the standard way of doing it, but there may be, this is really like the standard way, the standard pattern of doing it for these reasons. And one of them is the fact that it is pretty easy to like debug this later on by, getting that comprehensive view of all the data, right, by just changing this to be like select all from merged and see where we are at these different stages. Let me see if there's any other questions. Cool. All right. Well, if you understand that flow,